Good morning. I've got our shot set up on a beautiful female eagle sitting in that tree right there. We have negotiated, planned to not bother one another. So that will be an eagle, theoretically letting me read to her. She was eating, so there's some food down there. I'm hoping she'll go back to it. All right. I continue. A different symmetry. The conversation between Richard and Todd shows that although the boys' responses are asymmetrical, if looked at separately, each dismisses the other's concerns. They are symmetrical when looked at together. There went the eagle. Keeps looping around, so we're not going to give up. We're crazy like that. See if she comes back. Yep. She's looping around. All right. Each dismisses the other's concerns. They are symmetrical when looked at together. Todd responds to Richard's concerns about his drinking in exactly the same way that Richard responds to Todd's feelings of alienation by denying it is a problem. Okay, here's some dialogue. Here's dialogue between Richard and Todd. Richard says, "Hey man, I just don't feel, after what Ann said last night, I just don't feel like doing that." Todd says, "I don't think it was that way. You yourself knew it was no big problem." Richard says, "Oh, and Sam told Ann that I fell down the levee." Todd says, "It's a lie." Richard says, "I didn't fall. I slid. I caught myself." Todd says, "Don't worry about it." Richard says, "But I do, kind of. I feel funny in front of Sam. I don't want to do it in front of you." Todd says, "It doesn't matter, because sometimes you're funny when you fall off your butt." Todd denies that Richard was so drunk he was staggering. That's a lie. And then says that even if he was out of control, it wasn't bad. It was funny. And in interpreting this conversation between 10th grade boys, I initially saw their mutual reassurances and dismissals and their mutual revelations of troubles in terms of connection and sameness. But another perspective is possible. The conversation may be touching precisely because it was based on asymmetries of status, or more precisely, a deflecting of such asymmetries. When Todd tells his troubles, he puts himself in a potentially one-down position and invites Richard to take a one-up position by disclaiming troubles and asymmetrically offering advice or sympathy. By offering troubles of his own, Richard declines to take the superior position and restores their symmetrical footing, sending the meta message: "We're just a couple of guys trying to make it in a world that's tough on both of us, and both of us are about equally competent to deal with it." From this perspective, responding as a woman might, for example, by saying, "I can see how you feel. You must feel awful. So would I if it had happened to me," would have a totally different meaning for boys, since they would be inclined to interpret it through the lens of status. Such a response would send a meta message like, "Yes, I know, you incompetent jerk. I know how awful you must feel. If I were as incompetent as you, I'd feel the same way, but lucky for you, I'm not, and I can help you out here because I'm far too talented to be upset by a problem like that." In other words, Refraining from expressing sympathy is generous, insofar as sympathy potentially condescends. Women are often unhappy with the reactions they get from men when they try to start troubles talk. Men are often unhappy because they are accused of responding in the wrong way when they are trying to be helpful. But Richard and Todd seem satisfied with each other's way of reacting to their troubles, and their way makes sense. When men and women talk to each other, the problem is that each expects a different kind of response. The men's approach seeks to assuage feelings indirectly by attacking their cause. Since women expect to have their feelings supported, the men's approach makes them feel that they themselves are being attacked. The next category, don't ask. Talking about troubles is just one of many conversational tasks that women and men view differently, and that consequently cause trouble in talk between them. Another is asking for information, and this difference too is traceable to the asymmetries of status and connection. A man and a woman were standing beside the information booth at the Washington Folk Life Festival, a sprawling complex of booths and displays. "You ask," the man was saying to the woman. "I don't ask." Women are cautious about stating information that they know, especially to men. For example, a man with whom I discussed these dynamics later told me that my perspective clarified a comment made by his wife. They had gotten into their car and were about to go to a destination that she knew well, but he did not know at all. Consciously resisting an impulse to just drive off and find his own way, he began by asking his wife if she had any advice about the best way to get there. She told him the way, then added, "But I don't know. That's how I would go, but there might be a better way." Her comment was a move to redress the imbalance of power created by her knowing something he didn't know. She was also saving face in advance in case he decided not to take her advice. Furthermore, she was reframing her directions as just a suggestion rather than giving instructions. And the next one is, "I'll fix it if it kills me." The asymmetry implied in having and giving information is also found in having and demonstrating the skill to fix things, an orientation that we saw in men's approaches to troubles talk. To further explore the framing involved in fixing things, I will present a small encounter of my own. Unable to remove the tiny lid that covers the battery compartment for the light meter on my camera, I took the camera to a photography store and asked for help. The camera salesman tried to unscrew the lid, first with a dime and then with a special instrument. When this failed, he declared the lid hopelessly stuck. He explained the reason. It was screwed in with the threads out of alignment, and then explained in detail how I could take pictures without a light meter by matching the lighting conditions to shutter settings in accordance with the chart included in rolls of film. Even though I knew there wasn't a chance in the world I would adopt his system, I listened politely, feigning interest, and assiduously wrote down his examples. Based on an ASA of 100, since he got confused trying to give examples, based on an ASA of 64, he further explained that this method was actually superior to using a light meter. In this way, he minimized the significance of not being able to help me by freeing the battery lid. He framed himself as possessing useful knowledge and having solved my problem, even though he couldn't fix my camera. This man wanted to help me, which I sincerely appreciated, but he also wanted to demonstrate that he had the information and skill required to help, even though he didn't. There is a kind of social contract operating here. Many women not only feel comfortable seeking help, but feel honor-bound to seek it, accept it, and display gratitude in exchange. For their part, many men feel honor-bound to fulfill their request for help, whether or not it is convenient for them to do so. A man told me about a time when a neighbor asked him if he could fix her car, which was intermittently stalling out. He spent more time than he could spare looking at her car and concluded that he did not have the equipment needed to do the repair. He felt bad about not having succeeded in solving her problem. As if sensing this, she told him the next day and the next that her car was much better now, even though he knew he had done nothing to improve its performance. There is a balance between seeking help and showing appreciation. Women and men seem equally bound by the requirements of this arrangement. She was bound to show appreciation, even though he hadn't helped, and he was bound to invest time and effort that he really couldn't spare in trying to help. Another example of the social contract of asking for help and showing appreciation occurred on the street corner in New York City. A woman emerged from the subway at 23rd Street and Park Avenue South and was temporarily confused about which direction to walk in to reach Madison Avenue. She knew that Madison was west of Park, so with a little effort she could have figured out which way to go. But without planning or thinking, she asked the first person to appear before her. He replied that Madison did not come down that far south. Now, she knew this to be false. Furthermore, by this time, she had oriented herself. But instead of saying, "Yes, it does," or "Never mind, I don't need your help," she found a way to play out the scene as one in which he had helped her. She asked, "Which way is west?" And on being told, replied, "Thank you. I'll just walk west." From the point of view of getting directions, this encounter was absurd from start to finish. The woman didn't really need help, and the man wasn't in a position to give it. But getting directions really wasn't the main point. She had used the commonplace ritual of asking directions of a stranger, not only, and not mostly, to find her way on emerging from the subway, but to reinforce her connection to the mass of people in the big city by making fleeting contact with one of them. Asking for help was simply an automatic way for her to do this. On the next part, I'll help you if it kills me. I'm sorry. Boy, I tell you. I'll help you if it kills you. I think my brain's getting tired of some of these words. It's just going to do what it wants. There we go. I'll help you if it kills you. Martha bought a computer and needed to learn to use it. After studying the manual and making some progress, she had many questions. So she went to the store where she had bought it and asked for help. The man assigned to help her made her feel like the stupidest person in the world. He used technical language in explaining things, and each time she had to ask what a word meant, she felt more incompetent, an impression reinforced by the tone of voice he used in his answer, a tone that sent the meta message. This is obvious. Everyone knows this. He explained things so quickly, she couldn't possibly remember them. When she went home, she discovered she couldn't recall what he had demonstrated, even in cases where she had followed his explanation at the time. Still confused and dreading the interaction, Martha returned to the store a week later, determined to stay until she got the information she needed. But this time a woman was assigned to help her, and the experience of getting help was utterly transformed. The The woman avoided using technical terms for the most part, and if she did use one, she asked whether Martha knew what it meant and explained simply and clearly if she didn't. When the woman answered questions, her tone never implied that everyone should know this. And when showing how to do something, she had Martha do it, rather than demonstrating while Martha watched. The different styles of this teacher made Martha feel like a different student, competent rather than stupid one, not humiliated by her ignorance. Surely, not all men give information in a way that confuses and humiliates their students. There are many gifted teachers who also happen to be men, and not all women give information in a way that makes it easy for students to understand. But many women report experiences similar to Martha's, especially in dealing with computers, automobiles, and other mechanical equipment. They claim that they feel more comfortable having women explain things to them. The different meanings that giving help entails may explain why. If women are focusing on connections, they will be motivated to minimize the difference in expertise and to be as comprehensible as possible, since their goal is to maintain the appearance of similarity and equal status. Sharing knowledge helps even the score. Their tone of voice sends meta messages of support rather than disdain, although support itself can be experienced as condescension. I have to admit, that's like the most upsetting thing about this is all of the attempts at help and how it was apparently perceived as some kind of one-upsmanship, which I just can't know that. Like, I've listened to my other stories, but I am an oldest, and I have a lot of brothers, and so I sure didn't know that people may or may not like help, because, I mean, it is what you do, you know, like, since that first brother got here, I was 18 months old, go get a diaper, hold this bottle, make him stop crying, you know, like, it's from the beginning of my life, it is help, 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 and then I'm, like, reading this, and, like, well, no wonder nobody appreciates my help, I'm not their big sister. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but so many times I hear myself say, well, I said this, and it didn't mean anything to me, and the other person was like, well, I didn't know that, and I usually, mostly walk away, and then for, you know, like, it's a big deal for a few minutes, and then I like, let it go, but I didn't appreciate that having been raised as an oldest, and being a female, was that, that idea of just offering help freely is so natural, and it is not always met with, you know, like, appreciation or hugs and smiles. Someone's like, whatever, especially my siblings. I had to work on a whole list of things I could never ask them because it wasn't working. Like, you can't just ask people how their life is, apparently, because those are like parental questions or something. Well, that seems a little unfair to make rules and then I don't like them. That's unfair. You know what I'm saying? So, sorry, a little tangent there. Changed our view to another blurry spot. And I continue. If a man focuses on the negotiation of status and feels someone must have the upper hand, he may feel more comfortable when he has it. His attunement to the fact that having more information, knowledge, or skill puts him in a one-up position comes through in his way of talking. And if sometimes men seem intentionally to explain in a way that makes what they are explaining difficult to understand, it may be because their pleasant feeling of knowing more is reinforced when the student does not understand. The comfortable margin of superiority diminishes with every bit of knowledge the student gains, or it may simply be that they are more concerned with displaying their superior knowledge and skill than with making sure that the knowledge is shared. A colleague familiar with my ideas remarked that he'd seen evidence of this difference at an academic conference. A woman delivering a paper kept stopping and asking the audience, "Are you with me so far?" My colleague surmised that her main concern seemed to be that the audience understand what she was saying. When he gave his paper, his main concern was that he not be put down by members of the audience. And as far as he could tell, a similar preoccupation was motivating the other men presenting papers as well. From his point of view, if covering one's tracks to avoid attack entails obscuring one's point, it is a price worth paying. This is not to say that women have no desire to feel knowledgeable, or powerful. Indeed, the act of asking others whether they are able to follow your argument can be seen to frame you as superior. But it seems that having information, expertise, or skill at manipulating objects is not the primary measure of power for most women. Rather, they feel their power enhanced if they can be of help. Even more, if they are focusing on connection rather than independence and self-reliance, they feel stronger when the community is strong. Ooh, and the next one, trust me. A woman told me that she was incredulous when her husband dredged up an offense from years before. She had been unable to get the VCR to record movies aired on HBO. Her husband had looked at the VCR and declared it incapable of performing this function. Rather than accepting his judgment, she asked their neighbor, Harry, to take a look at it, since he had once fixed her VCR in the past. Harry's conclusion was the same as that of her husband, who was, however, incensed that his wife had not trusted his expertise. When he brought it up years later, the wife exclaimed in disbelief, "You still remember that? Harry is dead." The incident, though insignificant to the wife, cut to the core of the husband's self-respect, because it called into question his knowledge and skill at managing the mechanical world. Trust in a man's skill is also at issue between Felicia and Stan, another couple. Stan is angered when Felicia gasps in fear while he is driving. "I've never had an accident," he protests. "Why can't you trust my driving?" Felicia cannot get him to see her point of view, that she does not distrust his driving in particular, but is frightened of driving in general. Most of all, she cannot understand why the small matter of involuntary sucking in her breath should spark such a strong reaction. I agree with Felicia. All right, the next one is be nice. Having expertise and skill can reinforce both women's and men's sense of themselves. But the stance of expert is more fundamental to our notion of masculinity than to our concept of femininity. Women, according to convention, are more inclined to be givers of praise than givers of information. That women are expected to praise is reflected in a poster that was displayed in every United States post office branch, inviting customers to send criticism, suggestions, questions, and compliments. 3 of these 4 linguistic acts were represented by sketches of men. Only compliments were represented by a sketch of a woman with a big smile on her face, a gesture of approval on her fingers, and a halo around her head. The halo is especially interesting. It shows that the act of complimenting frames the speaker as nice. Giving praise, like giving information, is also inherently asymmetrical. It, too, frames the speaker as one-up in a position to judge someone else's performance. Women can also be framed as one-up by their classic helping activities as mothers, social workers, nurses, counselors, and psychologists. But in many of these roles, especially mothers and nurses, they may also be seen as doing others' bidding. The next category, overlapping motivations. When acting as helpers, women and men typically perform different kinds of tasks, but even the same task can be approached with eyes on different goals, and this difference is likely to result in misjudgments of others' intentions. The end of my camera story underlines this. At a family gathering, I brought the camera to my brother-in-law, who has a reputation in the family for mechanical ability. He took it to his workshop and returned an hour and a half later, having fixed it. Delighted and grateful, I commented to his daughter, I knew he would enjoy the challenge, especially, she pointed out, when it involves helping someone. I felt then that I had mistaken his displayed concern with the mechanics of the recalcitrant battery cover as reflecting his ultimate concern. But fixing the camera was a way of showing concern for me, of helping me with his effort. If women directly offer help, my brother-in-law was indirectly offering help, though through the mediation of my camera mediation, through the mediation. Yeah, whatever. English. A colleague who heard my analysis of this experience thought I had missed an aspect of my broken camera episode. He pointed out that many men get a sense of pleasure from fixing things because it reinforces their feelings of being in control, self-sufficient, and able to dominate the world of objects. This is the essence of Evelyn Fox Keller's thesis that the conception of science as dominating and controlling nature is essentially masculine in spirit. He told me of an incident in which a toy plastic merry-go-round ordered for his little boy arrived in pieces, having come apart during shipping. His wife gave the toy to her uncle, renowned in the family as a fixer and a helper. Her uncle worked for several hours and repaired the toy, even though it was probably not worth more than a few dollars. The uncle brought this up again the next time he saw them and said he would have stayed up all night rather than admit he couldn't put it together. My colleague was convinced that the motivation to gain dominion over the plastic object had been stronger than the motivation to help his sister and nephew, though both had been present. Furthermore, this man pointed out that he and many other men take special pleasure in showing their strength over the world of objects for the benefit of attractive women, because the thanks and admiration they receive is an added source of pleasure and satisfaction. His interpretation of my revised analysis was that my niece and I, both women, would be inclined to see the helping aspect of the act as the real or main motive, whereas he still was inclined to see the pleasure of demonstrating skill, succeeding where the camera expert had failed, and whacking the recalcitrant battery lid into line as the main ones. The element of negotiating status that characterizes many men's desire to show they are knowledgeable and skillful does not negate the connection implied in helping. These elements coexist and feed each other. But women's and men's tendencies to place different relative weights on status versus connection results in asymmetrical roles. Attuned to the meta-messages of connection, many women are comfortable both receiving help and giving it. though surely there are many women who are comfortable only in the role of giver of help and support. Many men sensitive to the dynamic of status, the need to help women, and the need to be self-reliant are comfortable in the role of giving information and help, but not in receiving it. I mean, it's going away. It's just like going really slow. Hello, buddy. There's a boat way out there, too. I don't know if you can see it. But there is a boat in the misty fog. I'll admit I can't see it on the video, but I can see it in real life. It's the middle of the camera shot. All right, back to our point here. Yes, many men sensitive to the need to help women and the need to be self-reliant are comfortable in the role of giving information and help, but not in receiving it. All right, the next one, The View from a Different Mountain. In a story by Alice Madison, The Colorful Alphabet. A man named Joseph invites another man, Gordon, to visit his family in the country because Gordon's wife has just left him. During the visit, they all climb a mountain. On the way down, they stop to rest, and Gordon realizes that he left his beloved old knapsack on the mountaintop. Joseph volunteers to climb back up to get it because Gordon is not used to climbing and his feet are sore. Joseph's wife goes with him, but she is too tired to climb all the way to the top, and he leaves her on the path to complete the mission himself. When he finds her again, he is empty-handed. The bag wasn't there. He says then that he knew it wouldn't be because he had seen a man carrying the bag past them when they all stopped to rest. He explains why he didn't just say that he had seen someone go by with the bag. I couldn't tell him I'd seen it and hadn't been smart enough to get it back for him. Instead, he says, I had to do something. Exhausted and frustrated, the wife is not so much angry as incredulous. She can't understand how he could have preferred reclimbing the mountain and making her reclimb it too, to admitting that he had seen someone carrying Gordon's bag. I would never have done that, she says. But she speaks more in wonder than anger. She explains, I just have blurted it out. I'd have been upset about making the mistake, but not about people knowing. That part's not a big deal to me. Her husband says, oh, is it ever a big deal to me? The story supports the view of men's style that I have been proposing. Joseph wanted to help Gordon, and he did not want to let it be known that he had done something he thought stupid. His impulse to do something to solve the problem was stronger than his impulse not to climb a mountain twice. But what struck me most strongly about the story was the wife's reflections on the experience. Here's what she thinks. It was one of the occasional moments when I am certain I haven't imagined him. I would never have done what he'd done, wouldn't have dreamt it or invented it. Joseph was simply not me. This excerpt reflects what may be the subtlest yet deepest source of frustration and puzzlement arising from the different ways that women and men approach the world. We feel we know how the world is, and we look to others to reinforce that conviction. When we see others acting as if the world were an entirely different place from the one we inhabit, we are shaken. We look to our closest relationships as a source of confirmation and reassurance. When those closest to us respond to events differently than we do, when they seem to see the same scene as part of a different play, when they say things that we could not imagine saying in the same circumstances. The ground on which we stand seems to tremble, and our footing is suddenly unsure. Being able to understand why this happens, why and how our partners and friends, though like us in many ways, are not us, and different in other ways, is a crucial step toward feeling that our feet are planted on firm ground. All right. I'm going to stop here because that was a lot of information from my brain. And then I'm going to start back up, and I can get us something just a little bit less, blurry and gray. I do not control the weather. I observe the weather. Oh, my word. Thank you for being with me. Whew. Sorry. I appreciate you. It's like misty and sleepy, like it's a dream or something. Or mostly I pretend I'm on the top of the mountains, where it's this way a lot. Thank you for being with me.